All right, so hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. All right, so welcome to another episode of the Free International Webinar brought to you by the Institute of Global Professionals, or IGP. And we are pleased to have you join us for the 921st episode of our daily webinar and for taking part in tonight's session. And we are coming to you live via StreamYard on Facebook and YouTube platforms. Thank you, folks, for finding the time and attending tonight's or today's program. We hope you will enjoy the program tonight, and if you do, please let us know. And if you're just meeting, I am Gafour M. Panimbang, an assistant professor from Adyong Memorial Polytechnic State College here in Lanao del Sur, Philippines, and a proud member of the Institute of Global Professionals, which is sponsoring this webinar series. And I am so privileged to be your host for tonight's episode. The Institute of Global Professionals, or IGP, is an ISO certified compliant training institute and a globally recognized multi-awarded international professional organization. We are a nonprofit training institute dedicated to making it possible for anyone to learn anything and anywhere for free online at any subject level. Here in IGP, we provide free online and offline learning platforms for education and skills training for students and professionals like you guys, backed by international speakers, coaches, and leading experts from all over the world. True to our mantra, feed your skill. It is our mission to empower people by providing an overall learning experience that meets your needs and helps you to achieve life goals. We believe that free education, more than anything, has the power to break through boundaries and transform lives. I will quickly go through some points to note so we all have a seamless webinar experience for tonight. All right. So our speakers for tonight will have the floor for about 30 to 45 minutes at the least in their presentation. And then after that, we'll conduct a short question and answer session. So if you have any content related questions you would like to ask the speaker during this webinar, please type them into the chat window and we'll address them during the Q&A. And we would like to get through as many of your questions as possible. Throughout the presentation, you will see a couple of questions pop up on the screen that would allow you to engage with us while the presentation is going on. And we appreciate you guys answering those questions coming in. Today's or tonight's session is being recorded to be available for viewing post-conference on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. That's Institute of Global Professionals. We are using our FB page and our YouTube account to store webinar recordings and make them available for public viewing. After this session, we'll be posting this recorded webinar on our YouTube channel for you to watch a replay in case you want to review anything. And we welcome you to revisit the content yourself and share it with your colleagues. Stay with us till the end for you to claim your e-verified certificate for tonight's webinar, as we'll be sharing with you the certificate code with the link down in the comments section below shortly after or before this webinar ends for you to download your e-certificate for free. We regret to inform you guys that as of this time, we won't have any online quiz game competition for a technical reasons. All right. Our website is now undergoing a maintenance, so please bear with us. All right. But still, you can get your certificate as we'll be giving you the code for you to download your certificate for tonight's session. All right. So As of this time, we managed to invite four speakers for tonight. And before that, if you think, guys, this program is useful to you, please show us your support by sharing this webinar with your social media communities. Keep on inviting your friends and colleagues you care about so they can benefit from this program too, or you can just simply tag their names. And if you like this program, smash the like button and subscribe to our channel if you haven't done that already. And we also invite you to leave us a comment as we'd love to hear from you guys. And tonight, we are covering a very interesting topic that is of utmost importance to all of our teachers and whatever professions that you may have. All right. If you wish to become a peace agent and peace advocate in your respective schools or office or everywhere that you are being assigned, all right, this topic is really for you because this is all about conflict management and transformation. And you know what? We are so lucky to have with us four great speakers from the Philippines to share with us their expertise on that same topic. And we are so glad that they could be here tonight or today to share their insights on the said topic. Now, please let's welcome our presenters for tonight. All right. And of course, uh, let us begin with our first speaker for tonight. All right. So, without further ado, I will turn the time over to our first speaker for tonight or today's event. And she is currently a teacher three from Lipai National High School, all the way from Zambales. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are so fortunate in having us here, Mom Nay M. Bessing. Welcome to the show, and we are so glad to have you here with us tonight.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for the introduction.
Yes, no problem.
Good morning. Can I start now, sir?
Sure, sure, sure. You can get straight to the content of your presentation if you
Okay,
wish,
sir.
or unless you have to add a little bit of your introduction.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I am Teacher May M. Bising, Teacher 3 of Lipay National High School, Division of Zambales. Once again, hello, everyone. It is indeed my pleasure and pride to be with you at this moment and at the same time share with you some important informations about a very timely topic. Before we move deeply with our first topic, may I ask some questions to everyone? Here comes the question. How would you describe your workplace atmosphere? Is it friendly? Is it happy? Or a healthy environment? Can you type your answer in our chat box, everyone, so that I will know I will know your answers. Um, can you hear me?
Hey, Ma'am Bessie.
Can you hear me?
Yes, of course.
Okay, sir. Okay,
Yes,
I
we
will
can
I
hear
will
you
continue.
clearly. Okay, proceed
Okay,
with your
thank you, sir.
presentation.
Okay, thank you, sir. It's good to see and it's good to know that almost everyone is experiencing a happy environment. Why? Why did I ask this question? According to World Health Organization, year 2009, A healthy workplace is one where workers and managers or even administrators collaborate to continually improve the health, the safety, and well being of all workers. And by doing this, it sustains the productivity of the business or even the organization. A healthy workplace is one where employees thrive in their work projects and feel fulfilled while also staying physically and mentally healthy. When we talk about our home or our own place, the emotional warmth displayed by parents while interacting with their children, provision of stimulating and learning experiences at home, and physical surroundings such as safety of play areas and cleanliness are manifestations of a healthy home. But we cannot get out of the reality that sometimes there are struggles, problems, hindrances that come along our way. And these factors really affect our principles, performances, and relationship to other people, right? So in our slide, okay, so our topic for this first session is a conflict management. This is an overviewing or an introduction of the the topic conflict management. Okay, so let's start. Before we start, I have prepared 5 questions or 4 questions rather that will come along our way as this slide will progress later. Um, Number one, the first question is what is conflict? What are the factors affecting conflict? What are the types of conflict? And what is conflict management? So let's start. Um, I have here one quotation to be remembered. A life without any type of conflict is a life lived in solitude. Why did I say it so? So let's watch my presentation for us to be able to justify the quotation in my screen. So, conflict, as the definition states here, conflict is a struggle and a clash of interest, opinion, or even principles. It is a term associated with Karl Marx theory in which groups in society compete over limited resources. So, from the definition itself, we have already a struggle and a clash. Okay, specifically to our interest, opinion, and even principles. And take note, it is not just individually speaking, but we have groups in society which compete over limited resources. So here are some of the emotions, or here are the emotions rather, that we are experiencing when we are experiencing conflict. So we have here an employee, a manager, a child, or even a baby. Okay, so let's move on. So, what are the factors affecting conflict? We have 5: contrasting and conflicting values. We have irritating and exasperating living habits, unrealistic and hidden expectations, ineffective and negative communication patterns, and selfishness and self-interest. So let's have it one by one. The first one is contrasting and conflicting values. We had an example there, and one employee wanting to head out on time to catch their child's soccer game, while another employee expects to stay late to finish a collaborative assignment. A values conflict occurs when we've got two things that are important to us and they are conflicting with each other and potentially reducing the amount of fulfillment in one or both of these areas. So, how many of you experiencing this kind of conflict or this factor which you really experience in your workplace? So, how are we going to deal with this? So the next factor is the irritating and exasperating living habits. We have here the example. Your elder sister is concentrating doing with her research paper, but his younger brother is talking loudly on the phone. Okay, so we cannot get out of this at home. Exasperating living habits, it is a feeling of being frustrated or annoyed when your child has been having a tantrum for an hour and you have to accomplish paperworks needed in your company or even in school. How are you going to deal with it again? So, there is conflict. The third one is unrealistic and hidden expectations. Example, you feel stressed and upset when things don't go as planned or your routine deviates slightly. When you are assuming a level of control that we don't have in a situation. We repeatedly feel disappointed that the expectation hasn't been met. For this factor, let's take this common saying: less expectation, less frustration. So, our fourth factor is ineffective and negative communication patterns. We have here our example: close minded or one sided interactions. Close minded people say things like, I could be wrong, but here's my opinion. Ineffective communication can lead to confusion, frustration, conflict, and low morale, while effective communication generates a positive connection between people. What are the signs of ineffective communication then? So we have lack of enthusiasm in interrupting other people, indirectness of your message, complaining, and lack of conciseness. Did you ever experience these signs? Well, then there is conflict. Our last but not the least factor is the selfishness and self interest. So we have here our example. You are pursuing higher education to get a better job so that you can make more money in the future. If all person cared about was limited to himself on her or herself, that person's self-interest could be equated with selfishness. But if someone cares about anything or anyone else beyond themselves, then this differs from selfishness in several important ways. Self interest is anything done for seeking personal gain. Our next topic is all about kinds of conflict. So we have task conflict, the relationship conflict, and the value conflict. So let's start with task conflict. It is also known as cognitive or substantive conflict. This involves differing ideas about how to perform a work related task or make a work related decision. Examples includes debates over the appropriate strategy for handling a project or varying views about how to allocate scarce resources. Task conflict occurs when two parties are unable to move forward on a task due to differing needs, behaviors, or attitudes. Let's have a specific example here. For us teachers, sometimes the overlapping of workloads or paperworks are the reasons why we are experiencing task conflict. Is it right? Am I correct? Due to overlapping of responsibilities, we sometimes neglect our other obligations. And from that, conflict arises. Let's move on to relationship conflict. It is a disagreement between people. Example, partners, friends, siblings, or co-workers. The root of the conflict might be something like a difference of opinion, experience, taste, perspective, or personality, or even beliefs. Certain example of this is that it occur within work environment include making remarks about coworkers, issuing the unequal treatment, ignoring or interrupting others, underestimating colleagues, not giving credit where credit is due, insulting, and yelling. Relationship conflict is often the result of power that leaves one partner feeling moved, dependent upon the other. Did anyone experience such like this? How did you deal with it? And our third kind is a value conflict. Examples of value conflict is in our workplace can include employees who want to spend more time at home with family than in the office, or employees who disagree on appropriate methods through which to complete a shared task. We should be aware of our individual differences and make sure we know what we are going to prioritize. I will just add some important elements that are part of conflict theory. This information is not in my screen. So we have competition. So if there is conflict, there is competition. If there is conflict, there is revolution. And if there is conflict, there is inequality. And if there is conflict, there is war. So how are we going to deal with it? Let's define conflict management. Conflict management, it is the process of limiting the negative aspects of conflict while increasing the positive aspects of conflict. The aim of conflict management is to enhance learning group outcomes, including effectiveness or performance in an organizational setting. So, we cannot get through it. We cannot get out of the fact that in our everyday lives, we will encounter conflicts because it is a part of our life. It is a part of our job, and we should handle it properly. Because before I end my presentation, let me give to you words of wisdom by Ronald Reagan. Peace is not absence of conflict. It is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. So this ends my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. Sir?
All right, so there you go. All right, my apology, but I'm having a what do you call this? All right, I was totally cut out just earlier. Have you not noticed? I'm awfully sorry, but I'm having a intermittent connection here. As you can hear in my background, we're having a sort of rain outside. So that's it. So thank you, Ma'am May Bessing, for sharing us your invaluable thoughts on conflict management. It was really very interesting and informative. All right.
Thank you, sir.
I really particularly like the proverb you share with us that says, A life without any type of conflict is a life lived on solitude, right?
Yes, sir.
That's great. This is really a real manifestation that conflict is really inevitable and
Yes.
it's really part of our daily life. And so
Yes, sir.
it really depends on how we handle whatever conflict that we are facing with. And what is good about this is that this will actually pave way for anyone out there to gain knowledge on the skills on how they could possibly deal with any conflict that they are having with.
Yes,
Again,
sir.
thank you, Ma'am Bessie, for the
Thank you.
wisdom and knowledge you share with us tonight.
It's my
All right.
pleasure, sir.
Yes. And Ma'am Bessie will join us later for the Q&A portion of our webinar. All right. So let's move on with our second speaker for tonight. And our second speaker for tonight is also a teacher, to be specific, teacher Three from Mona Memorial National High School, SDO, also all the way from Zambales, Philippines. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are thrilled to have Ma'am Jesime S. Nenemo joining us as our second speaker, and she will be discussing about how to manage conflict. So again, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ma'am Jesime S. Nenemo on the show.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, everyone. I am Jessamine as Minimo Teacher 3 from Mena Memorial National High School, Schools Division of Zambales. And it's an honor and a great privilege to be here again because last time I talked about technological advances, promoting a better quality of education. And now I'm so much happy to be back to discuss another interesting topic with you all.
Really?
So let me share my screen, sir.
Sure, sure. You can now get straight to the content of your presentation.
Okay, am I audible, sir?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, so thank you so much, sir. Okay, so again, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good day, everyone. So here we can see different words flashed on the screen. We have this concept, competition, trouble, fight, aggression, problem, opponents, dramatic, anger, opposite, and the biggest word we can see here is the word conflict. So, Ma'am May discussed to us earlier the overview of conflict. And remember that conflict is a natural phenomenon that happens in every ongoing relationship. And since conflict is unavoidable, we must learn how to manage it. So conflict is a sign of a need for a change or improvement, an opportunity for growth, new understanding, and improved communication. And conflict cannot be resolved unless it is addressed with appropriate action. So now, let me give you some tips on how to manage conflict. So we have here the first one, analyze the conflict. Okay, so hold on, sir. I'm having trouble with my presentation. Looks like it's not moving. Okay, just a moment, sir. Okay, so sorry for the technicalities. Okay, so the first one is to analyze the conflict. So finding out the source of a conflict is the key to solving it, right? So workplace conflicts can seem very complicated when in reality, there are typically one or two main causes. So think carefully about the situation to pinpoint the central issues at the heart of the conflict. Identifying the root cause will allow us to better articulate our concerns and focus on our perspective. So we can ask ourselves some questions here. So, what are those questions? We can ask ourselves, what event triggered the conflict? Are we angry? And why? What do we want but we aren't getting? Is our anger justified or we are just overreacting with the situation? So we should identify the key players involved as well. So for example, if we're upset with our coworker that has left early several days in a row, the root cause of the conflict could be our frustration at feeling like we've been doing more than our fair share at work. So we should make a list of the issues at hand and study the ones that overlap. If the root cause of the conflict isn't obvious, well, overlapping issues can often tell us exactly what it is. We might have some intrapersonal or internal conflicts instead. It's also vital for us to analyze conflict that exists within ourselves, of course. So we should try some maybe journaling to keep track of our feelings and pinpoint the source of our inner turmoil. Okay, so the first one is to analyze the conflict. And then the second one is okay, and then the second one is to stay calm and focus on the common goal. So as we can see here, we should keep a level of head prevents conflict from escalating further. Okay, so let's be back with the track. Okay, so whether we're directly involved in the conflict or in the middle of the conflict between other people, we must keep calm to ensure the situation doesn't escalate. So the common goal here is any conflict should be manageable and resolve the problem quickly and fairly. With this, this will make our priority and ensure everyone else is on board too. So how are you going to do this? So first is to acknowledge the conflict rather than avoiding it. Okay, conflict can only be solved when addressed directly and embraced as an opportunity for growth. And then next, if you're feeling overwhelmed or anxious, consider taking a step back before confronting the problem. Conflicts are less likely to be solved rationally when either side is flooded with emotions. So, as they say, we should not make decisions whenever we are angry, and too happy. Okay? And then the last one is when managing a conflict for coworkers or subordinates, reassure them that we'll be as objective as possible while we work together. And then the third one is to separate the person from the problem. So, resolve by focusing on the issue, not the person involved. Again, not the person involved. So view the problem as a specific incident or behavior instead of blaming the other person's character as a whole. So this makes the conflict feel less personal for both parties and thus makes it easier to solve. It can also salvage our relationship with other person where otherwise we might decide not to work with them anymore. So just for instance, if someone in the office is being disruptive, so what we are going to do is to focus on minimizing the behavior rather than accusing the person responsible. So let's say there were a lot of disruptions today rather than you're disruptive and rude, right? So it is much better to hear the second one than the first one. And the fourth one or the fourth tip is be an active listener. So this is one of the most important tips that I will share with you now. So be an active listener. So active listening promotes positive, open, and respectful communication as well. So in social situations, it can be powerful tool to ensure we understand what someone else is saying. So we must give the other person time to talk uninterrupted and listen non-judgmentally. Maintain a steady but non-aggressive eye contact and focus on them without trying to think a rebuttal while they speak. So again, how are we going to do this? First, let's save all questions and comments until they fully outline their position and finish speaking. And then the second one is to avoid body language that suggests judgment or anger, such as eye rolling, tightly crossed arms or legs, or smirking. Because being judgmental will make the other people or other person feel like um, they can't trust you. So, for you to be able to be trusted, you should not be judgmental. Okay. Next is to encourage the person with simple affirming comments or gestures. So a quick nod or a simple can let them know we're paying attention to what they're saying. And the next, show compassion for the other person's position. They'll be more agreeable if they see us trying to understand what they're coming from or where they coming from. Okay, so be an active listener. And the next is share your position or share our position. So be specific to help the other person understand our perspective. So let the other person know how we feel, the specific problem, and its impact on us. So we must use I-based statements to keep the conversation focused on our needs and emotions. And then list the few specific scenarios that illustrate our point so the person can see things from our point of view. So for example, let's start I-based statements with I feel, I think. So we could tell a coworker, I feel like my ideas are sometimes overlooked. Instead of more accusatory alternative, you never listen to my ideas. So it is better to hear, I feel like my ideas are sometimes overlooked rather than you never listen to my ideas. Right? So use I-based statements. And the next, specific examples can drive our point home. So if you feel overlooked at work, we could say, I was disappointed when my suggestions weren't included in yesterday's project notes. Okay? And in the case of the intrapersonal conflict, take time to acknowledge our own feelings also. It is essential. Okay? Be aware of what we're feeling and why. Even negative emotions like sadness and loneliness, frustrations, and anger. Okay? And the next, okay, it is also one of the most important tips. So use neutral language. Okay. So neutral language keeps the discussion objective and non-judgmental. So we have some examples of inflammatory languages such as profanity, name calling.
Yung away sa lower left side, yung pinitin niya pag ayaw malipat.
Okay, so just a moment, sir and ma'am. I'm having some technicalities with the slide. Ayun. Okay, so maybe I'll just present it this view to avoid technicalities, because if I'm going to click the slideshow, the presentation is hanging. Okay, so thank you so much for the considerations, ma'am and sir. Okay, so again, let's get back with the sixth tip to manage conflict. Okay, so again, use neutral language. So neutral language keeps the discussion objective and non-judgmental. So we have different kinds of inflammatory languages like profanity, name calling, and put downs. Okay, so using those inflammatory languages can only escalate the conflict. Instead, what we're going to do is to keep the discussion less emotional by using objective language. So let's rephrase negative statements into neutral comments and ask sincere questions to get our coworker's side of the story and just a calm, even tone of voice. So an example of inflammatory language would be telling a colleague, "You tried to undermine me in front of our boss. You're a backstabber who wants to make me look bad." Okay? Instead of saying this, let's rephrase this into neutral comments. Okay? So let's say, "I'm wondering why my presentation was interrupted yesterday. I really wanted to show the supervisor my work. Could you help me understand what happened?" So use a lot of neutral phrases like "help me understand," "I wonder if," or "how can we solve this?" Because neutral language includes any phrasing that definitely doesn't attack the other person. Okay. So if our colleague uses inflammatory language, don't hesitate to ask them, to stop or get a mediator to help, we need some mediator if that happens. So be polite but firm. Keep a cool head and don't let them rile you up too. Okay, so the seventh tip here is reflect on the situation. So show all parties that we hear and understand their concerns. So often conflict stems from one party feeling as though they're not being heard or understand. So take time throughout our conversation to reiterate what the other person says, because this will help us clarify our understanding of the situation and convey to the other person that we do hear them also. Okay? So, for example, let's say we have a conflict with our coworker and they explain their position to us. So, we could say, to clarify, we feel you were overlooked, or we feel we are overlooked for the new project and would like to be part of the planning committee. So once you reflect on the situation, let the other person confirm or correct us also. So either way, this ensures that we're both on the same page. And the next is work together to compromise and find a solution. So cooperation encourages everyone to stop tossing around the blame. So resolve the conflict by working together and brainstorming solutions to the conflict that addresses everyone's concerns. So what we're going to do here is to write down our ideas and see if there's one solution that both of us find fair and reasonable. So good resolution usually involves compromise, which means meeting halfway so that we both live satisfied. And the next is make a solution plan. So a plan defines each party's responsibilities and prevents more conflicts. Okay. So after finding a solution, of course, everyone can agree on. So what's next is to sit down together and figure out that we'll all do our best to resolve the dispute. So how will the immediate problem be fixed? What other practices might help avoid future conflict and maintain positive communication? So we should ensure everyone involved collaborates on the win-win solution. So we should consider that. So as we put together a plan, let everyone know we appreciate their efforts and that we're willing to get together soon to check on progress. And the next is to pick our battles. Okay? Not all conflicts are worth holding on to at the cost of our energy, because some issues can't be solved to the satisfaction of both parties, especially if one person rejects any negotiation. So in those cases, ask ourselves how much the issue at the core of the conflict matters to us. Are we willing to concede or keep dialoguing to reach a different resolution? Is this conflict worth our time and energy? So let's reflect. So conceding, because conceding doesn't mean saying you're right and I'm wrong. Instead, say, I've thought about the situation and think we feel more strongly about it that I can do. I'm willing to back you up and put the issue to rest. And the tip number 11 is to agree to disagree. So how are we going to agree to disagree? So focus on finding a solution rather than determining who is right. Remember that truth is relative. What one person considers true is not necessarily true for someone else. So look for mutually agreeable solutions with your coworker rather than arguing with our opinions. So in the end, it doesn't matter who is right, and placing blame drags out the conflict. So for example, consider that the differing testimony of various co-workers who have heard this about the same conflict from several different sources. So the truth depends on a person's point of view because we have different perspectives, right? Okay. So next, forgive each other. So forgiveness is the easiest path towards future cooperation. So apologize if we have wronged each other somehow, and find a place that allows us to truly forgive each other. So even if we can't completely forget what happened, forgiveness is the most mature route, allowing us to put the conflict behind us fully. So be honest and genuine with the other person and accept their apology if they offer one too. So if we can't forgive the other person in case, then at the very least maintain a distantly polite or professional demeanor when we work together. And then the second one is it takes strong character and compassion to forgive someone, of course. Now, time heals all wounds. So if we can forgive someone who hurt who hurt us, be proud of ourselves for moving on from the conflict. Okay? And then next, tip number 13 is to ask a third party for help. So a trusted confidant can give us confidential and objective advice. So if we feel that we're getting nowhere or things are getting worse, ask for help managing the conflict. So consult our friend or superior and seek professional counseling, or ask some colleague for help, because a third party can offer a better perspective in situations where the people involved are so emotionally invested that it's hard to think straight. So generally, we should always deal directly with the person we're conflict with and keep any discussions confidential, of course. However, a third party is sometimes necessary if the conflict escalates. And the last tip that I'm going to share with you is to build up more positive relationship. So collaborate and bond with our coworkers to prevent future conflict. So after successfully managing a conflict, offer them some sincere thanks for working with us. From that point forward, continue to acknowledge and compliment their progress, of course. No? Compliment their progress also. Build a more positive relationship between the two of you or the two of us. And then communicate regularly to prevent more conflicts. So, as they say, communication is the key. So the next time we work on together or you work something together, celebrate the progress you've both made. So, for example, we can say, this has been great. I'm delighted we got the chance to collaborate again. And the other thing is, offer the other person a compliment on their work every so often. Like, that presentation was really well done. You clearly worked hard on it. Okay? So, those are the tips on how to manage a conflict in workplace or anywhere. Okay? Or with someone that we are having conflicts with. So before I end my presentation here, I'm leaving a quotation here. So it says here, to be kind is more important than to be right. Many times, what people need is not a brilliant mind that speaks, but a special heart that listens. Because here, we're not talking about on how intelligent or how smart a person is in explaining and giving her perspective or what. What we need here is the heart that listens, the heart that forgives, the heart that understands. So remember that in every situation, whenever we are going to have conflict with other people or person, we should consider those tips for us to be well guided. So with that, Here are my references, and thank you so much for listening.
All right. So thank you so much, Mom Jessamine Menemo,
Thank
for
you so much,
providing us,
sir.
yes, for providing us an opportunity to deepen our understanding on conflict management by analyzing the conflict itself, right? For us
Yes,
to
sir.
really reconsider our perspective, which are, often heavily influenced by our emotions, misunderstandings, assumptions, suspicions, and mistrust. This way, we can provide immediate solution before it becomes chronic, right?
Yes, sir.
You,
Definitely, sir.
yes, your discussion is such a very substantial presentation, and I also like your discussion on using polite expressions to sound more polite. This is just to avoid misunderstanding, which is the most common cause of conflict between and
Yes,
among the
sir.
people. All right.
Yes, sir.
So again, thank you so much, Mom Jessamine Minimo, and Mom Jessamine will join us again later for our question and answer portion. All right. So before we go any further, okay, we would like first to give a huge shout out to Realin Durango for being spotted for his or her continued support to IGP through his or her regular attendance in most of our webinar series conducted. And so for that reason, IGP is so pleased to award you its lifetime membership certificate for being a loyal follower of IGP. So for that reason, congratulations, Mom Realine Durango. All right. So at this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to hand the floor over to our third speaker. All right. He is also a teacher too, to be specific, from Pamibian Integrated School. All right. Uh, Also from Zambales. All right. So join us in welcoming Sir John Paul O. Valereo on the show.
Okay, so thank you so much, sir.
No problem, sir.
Okay, so let me share my screen.
Sure. But as of this time, I cannot see you on the screen. Okay, so what I'm seeing is your screen. I mean, your slide presentation. All right, so there you go.
Okay, so before I start my discussion for today, so my assigned topic is all about conflict transformation. So by the way, I'm John Paul O. Valerio, a teacher too, MAED graduate from Pamibian Integrated School, School Division of Zambales, Philippines. So, creating a map for conflict transformation. So, it is common in the study of conflict to develop a map that help us to engage in conflict assessment and analysis. Similarly, it is useful to have a map of what we mean by transformation. So in figure 1, it provides a shortcut overview of such a map which can help us to visualize the development of a strategy to constructive transform conflict. So, this transformational framework has three components. Okay, so each of which represent a point of inquiry and the development of a response to conflict. So the first components is the presenting situation. Second component is the horizon of preferred future, and the last one is the development of change processes linking the two. So the movement from the present toward desired future is not a straight line, but rather a set of dynamic initiatives that set in motion change processes and create a sustained platform to pursue long term change. So, such a framework emphasizes the challenge of how to end something not desired and how to build something that is desired. So, in this figure entitled The Big Picture of Conflict Transformation, we have three inquiry. So, the first inquiry is presenting situation, horizon of future, and we have inquiry three, development of change processes. So first point of inquiry is the presenting situation. So the conflict episode that provides an opportunity to look both at the content of the dispute and the patterns of relationship in the context in which the dispute is expressed. So this is graphically represented in figure 1 as a set of embedded circles of spheres. So a transformational view raises two important questions. So first question is what are the immediate problems that need to be solved? And the second question is what is the overall context that needs to be addressed in order to change destructive patterns? So, in other words, transformation views the presenting issues as an expression of the larger system of relationship patterns. It moves beyond the episodic expression of the conflict and focuses on the relational and historical patterns in which the conflict is rooted. So, put another way, presenting issues connect the present with the past. The patterns of how things have been in the past provide a context in which the issues and the dispute rise toward the surface, but while they create an opportunity to remember and recognize, presenting issues do not have the power to change what has already transpired. So, and the potential for change lies in our ability to recognize, to understand, and redress what has happened and create new structures and ways of interacting in the future. So as you can see in this figure, we have the inquiry to horizon of the future. Okay? So the second point of inquiry is the horizon of the future, the image of what we wish to create. It asks us to consider what we would ideally like to see in place. However, this is not simply a model of linear change in which there is a movement from the present situation to the desired future. While the presenting issues act as an impetus toward change, the horizon of the future points toward the possibilities of what could be constructed and built. It represents a social energy that informs and create orientation. Thus, the arrow points not only forward to the future, but also back toward the immediate situation and the range of change processes that may emerge. So, this combination of arrows suggests that transformation is both a circular and a linear process, or what we will refer to here as a process structure. And the third inquiry is the development of change processes. This is the final major inquiry, is the design and support of change processes, which is this broader component requires that we think about response to conflict as the development of change processes that attend to the web of interconnected needs, relationships, and also patterns, because the change processes should address both the immediate problems and the broader relational and instructional patterns. We need to reflect on multiple levels and types of change rather than focusing on a single operational solution. And change processes must not only promote short-term solutions, but also build platforms capable of promoting long-term social change. So taken as a whole, this big picture provides a lens that permits us to envision the possibilities of immediate response and longer-term constructive change, while it requires a capacity to see through and beyond the presenting issues in real time. However, to more fully understand this approach, we need to explore in greater depth how platforms for constructive change are conceptualized and developed as process structures. So, we now proceed to the process structures platform for transformation. Okay, so we come now to the operational side of transformation. The key challenge is how to support and sustain a platform with a capacity to adapt and generate ongoing desired change, while at the same time responding creatively to immediate needs. To engage this challenge, we have to think about platforms as process structures. So in modern physics, like for example, process structures are natural phenomena that are dynamic, adaptive, and changing, and yet at the same time sustain a functional and recognizable form and structure. Like Margaret Waitley refers to them as things that mainly form over time yet have no rigidity of the structure. So the two terms that make up this term is the word process and the word structure. So point to two interdependent characteristics, the adaptability and the purpose. Transformational change processes must feature both of these characteristics. So they must be both linear and circular. So in simple terms, linear means that things move from one point to the next in a straight line. It is a associated with a rational, logical understanding of events in terms of cause and effect. However, in the social arena, events are likely moving along broad directions not always visible from a short-term perspective. So in this arena, a linear perspective asks us to stand back and take a look at the overall direction of social conflict and the change we seek. So it requires us to articulate how we think things are related and how movement is created. So specifically, it asks us to look at the patterns of interaction, not just the immediate experience, and understand the changes in this broad pattern. So circular understanding suggests that we need to think carefully about how social change actually develops. So this notion of circularity underscores some defining elements of transformational change processes. So first, it reminds us that things are connected and in relationship. Second, it suggests that the growth of something often nourishes itself from its own process and dynamic. In other words, it operates as a feedback loop. Third, the most critical to our inquiry and emphasis on circularity makes it clear that processes of change are not indirectionable. So, indirectional rather. So, in this figure represents change as a cycle. Okay? So, as you can see, we have number one, things move forward. Okay? Two, things hit a wall, movement stops. And three, things move backwards. And fourth, things collapse. Okay, so here in this figure, number one is things move forward. Okay, so there are times when we feel as if desired change is happening, things move forward and progress, and what we hope to build seems to be inside. Okay? And number two, at other times, we feel as if we have reached an impasse or hit a wall, nothing is happening, or all pathways forward seem blocked. Okay? And number three, things move backward. Sometimes we feel as if the change processes are going backwards and what has been achieved is being undone. In worst case scenarios, we hear language like, in a single stroke, years of work have been set back. So common to the change processes is the feeling that we are swimming against the tide or headed um, upstream. And four, finally, we sometimes feel like we are living through a complete breakdown. So it seems as if everything is falling apart and collapsing. These periods tend to be deeply depressing and are often accompanied by the repeated echoes of we have to start from ground zero. So all of these experiences are integral parts of the change process and provide us with some important insights about change. That first, no one point in time determines the broader pattern. Rather, change encompasses different sets of patterns and directions. Second, we should be um, cautious about going forward too quickly. Sometimes going back may create more innovative ways forward, and falling down may create new opportunities to build. Third, we should be aware that life is never static, and that we must constantly adapt. So in next figure 3 represents a simple process structure which features a web of dynamic circles that create an overall momentum and direction. One might think of this as a rotini, a spiral made up of multi-directional internal patterns that create a common overall movement. So it features both the purpose associated with the linearity and also the feedback loops associated with the circularity. So the key to create a platform for transformation in the midst of social conflict lies in holding together a healthy dose of both circular and linear perspective, because a transformational platform is essentially this: the building of an ongoing and adaptive base at the epicenter of conflict from which it is possible to generate processes that create solutions to short-term needs and provide a capacity to work on this strategic long-term, this constructive change in systematic relational context. So we can visualize this idea in figure 4 by adding to our process structure the rising escalation of conflict episodes. So in order to understand a transformational platform, we need to visualize the idea of an ongoing base from which processes can be generated. So the escalation of conflict creates opportunity to establish and sustain this base. So from the transformational view, developing a process to provide a solution to the presenting problem is important, but not the key. So central to transformation is building a solution or building a base that generate processes that, one, provide adaptive responses to the immediate and future iterations of conflict episodes, and two, address the deeper and longer term relational and systematic patterns that produce violent, destructive expressions of conflict. So this is the figure about transformational um, platforms. Okay? So in other words, a conflict transformation must be short-term responsive and long-term strategic. The defining characteristic of such a platform is the capacity to generate and regenerate change processes responsive to both immediate episodes and the relational context. So it is in this way an adaptive process structure, one that can produce creative solutions to a variety of problems. Okay? Next is the practices for transformational strategies. So in earlier sections, I described conflict transformation as a set of lenses that combine to create a way to look at social conflict and develop responses. Here, I explore how to make this framework applicable by outlining several core practices that are useful in addressing social conflict from a transformational approach. So we have um, practice 1, develop a capacity to see presenting issues as a window. 2, develop a capacity to integrate multiple time frames. Practice 3, develop a capacity to pose the energies of conflict as dilemmas. 4. Develop a capacity to make complexity a friend, not a foe. And last, develop a capacity to hear and engage the voice of identity and relationship. So the first practice is develop a capacity to see presenting issues as a window. So a transformational approach relies on a capacity to see immediate situation without being overwhelmed by the demands of presenting issues, the urgency and that pushes for a quick solution, and anxieties that often develop as conflict escalates. So the pursuit of broader transformational goals requires us to look beyond the immediate problems and to see these issues as a window. So just as we look through the glass, focusing our attention on what lies beyond the window, we look through the immediate issues to discover the relational context and the underlying causes of conflict. So this is what some authors have called the capacity to see the difference between content of a conflict and its emotional and relational context. Practice 2, develop a capacity to integrate multiple time frames. So approaching the immediate situation as a window also involves the ability to think about change without being constrained by a short-term view of time. So this is not to say that short-term perspectives are never appropriate. The key is the ability to recognize the needs of multiple time frames and create strategies that integrate short-term response with long-term change. Addressing immediate episodes and broader relationship patterns requires processes with different time frames. That processes that will be effective in one case are not likely to be effective in another. So for the transformation oriented practitioner, the key capacity is an ability to recognize what sorts of processes and timeframes may be needed to address the different kinds of change. And we also have practice 3, develop a capacity to pose the energies of conflict as dilemmas. So posing conflicts as dilemmas involves shifting from an either or frame of reference to both and frame of reference. In settings of sustained violence, we sometimes face what appear to be impossible solutions that involve outright contradiction. So, for example, um, those of working in relief and aid agencies in the early 1990s struggled with choices about where to put our their energies and responses when none of the apparent options seem adequate. So, should we send food and relief aid even though we know armed groups will take advantage of it to continue the war, or should we not send food but then feel helpless about the enormous humanitarian plight? So far too often, how we frame our questions limited our strategies. So framing choices in rigid either or terms made it difficult to handle complexity. So a shift in thinking emerged when we reframe our question to reflect the legitimacy of different but not incompatible goals rather than accepting a frame of reference that pose our situation as choosing between one important goal or another. So we reframe the questions in terms of interdependent goals. So how can we build capacities for peace in this setting and at the same time create responsive mechanism for the delivery of humanitarian aid. So the formula is this. So how can we address A and at the same time build B? So this way of formulating the question creates a capacity to recognize different but interdependent aspects of a complex situation and develop integrative responses. So the capacity to reframe conflict in this way enables us to more clearly identify our goals and seek innovative options for action. And second to the last practice, we have the practice 4, develop a capacity to make complexity a friend, not a foe. So in conflicts, especially when there has been a long history of patterns and episodes that were not constructively addressed, people feel overwhelmed. It may seem that the situation is just too complicated, but that there are too many things going on to even try to explain it. At times of escalated conflict, complexity describes a situation in which we feel forced to live with multiple and competing frames of reference about what things mean. So we are also faced with lots of things happening at multiple levels between different sets of people. So all at the same time. This often leads to a sense of ambiguity which produces three feelings. So we feel insecure about what it all means. We are not sure where it is going, and we feel as if we have little or no control over what happens. So this often leads people to seek escape or to find a quick solution. But in order to constructively deal with complexity, we must make it a friend rather than a foe and recognize its potential for building desired change. So one of the great advantages of complexity is that change is not tied exclusively to one thing, action, or option. So, the first key is to trust the capacity of systems to generate options and avenues for change. Second, we must pursue those options that appear to hold the greatest promise for constructive change. And third, we must not lock rigidly onto to one idea or approach. So the potential avenues of change generated in complex systems are numerous. So complexity is especially a friend when cycles and episodes of conflict seem to narrow toward the same outcomes every time. So it is here that paying careful attention to the multiplicity of options can create new ways to look at old patterns. And last, practice, develop a capacity to hear and engage the voice of identity and relationship. So we have mentioned time and again the need to look for see the patterns in the context that underpin the presenting situation. This involves an ability to recognize and then develop response processes that engage the deeper core of the conflict. Two central root causes of social conflict are identity and relationship. Wherein, when we say identity, or identity is best understood as a relational dynamic that is constantly being redefined. So it is not primarily about negotiating an agreement to solve a material problem, but rather is about protecting a sense of self and group survival. So while it is rarely explicitly addressed, identity shapes and moves the expression of conflict. So at the deepest level, it is lodged in the narratives of how people see themselves, who they are, where they are where they come from, and what they fear they will become. So it is also deeply rooted in their relationships with others. So a central challenge for transformation is how to create spaces and processes that encourage people to address and articulate positive sense of identity in relationship to others, but not in reaction to them. So this can be accomplished in three ways. So first, be attentive to language, metaphors, and expressions that signal the distresses of identity in order to what do you call this, in order to deal with core issues of identity. One must acknowledge them as a um, issues. Okay. Second, move toward appeals to identity rather than away from them. So acknowledge that the conflict requires a process that more explicitly addresses issues of identity and relationships. So generating solutions to immediate problems is not enough. And last, design transformation processes as dynamic platforms that create repeating patterns of exchange and exploration rather than produce immediate negotiated solutions. So we have three guiding principles characterize this process of exchange and exploration. So we have honesty, iterative, learning, and approach exchange. So first, we should work toward the creation of spaces where people feel safe enough to be deeply honest with themselves and others about their fears, their hopes, hurts, and responsibilities. Honesty reflects parties' sense of safety and builds trust. Second, we must create multiple points of access and repetitive examination for addressing identity. So the negotiation and a definition of identity is a complex process that requires processes of interaction with others as well as inner reflection about self. Identity work is not a one-time decision-making process, but rather an ongoing learning process about self and others. So this requires an iterative platform for addressing identity concerns within a framework of broader constructive change. And last, appropriate exchange calls attention to the need to design work on identity in ways that respect people. So beyond direct face-to-face dialogue, there are many ways that learning and deepening understanding about identity and the relationship can occur. So this includes dialogue as music, dialogue as sport, and dialogue as shared work to preserve old city centers, parks, and mountains. So all of this may do more than traditional dialogue to advance learning and understanding. So in addition, it is important to be what do you call this? Attentive to people's perceptions of how identity is linking to um, power and um, the definition of the systems and structures that organize and govern their relationships. So this is particularly important for people who feel their identity is eroded, marginalized, or under deep threat. So when addressing identity-based concerns, processes must strive to understand the roots of people's perceptions and address the systematic changes needed to assure access and respectful participation. So, for my conclusions, the lenses of conflict transformation focus on the potential for constructive change emergent from and catalyzed by the rise of social conflict because the potential for broader change is inherent in any episode of conflict. So from personal to structural levels, the lenses can easily be applied to a wide range of conflict. So a key change to this framework lies in its capacity to think about multiple avenues of response. So to use our earlier comparison, we suggested that transformation builds on and integrates the contribution and the strengths of conflict resolution approaches. So a transformational approach inquires about both the specifics, the immediate apparent in the episode of conflict, as well as the potential for broader constructive and desired change. So clearly, there are arenas in which transformation is limited and a quick and direct resolution of the problem is more appropriate. So in disputes where parties need a quick and final solution to a problem and do not have a significant relationship. So they typically appeal to negotiation and mediation. So in such cases, the exploration of relational and structural patterns are limited of or limited value. So for example, um, a one-time business dispute over a payment between two people who hardly know each other and will never have contact again is not a context to explore a transformational application. So however, in cases where parties share an extensive past and have the potential for significant future relationships and where the episodes arise in an organizational, community, or broader social context, simple resolution approaches may be too um, narrow. So, though they may solve the immediate problems, they miss the greater potential for constructive change. So, this is even more significant in context where there are repeated and deep-rooted cycles of conflict episodes that have created destructive and violent patterns. In such cases, avenues to promote transformational change should be um, pursued. So conflict transformation places before us some big questions. Where are we headed? Why do we do this work? What are we hoping to contribute and build? So increasingly, I am convinced that those in the alternative dispute resolution field and the vast majority of people and communities who wish to find more constructive ways to address conflict in their lives were drawn to their perspectives and practices of conflict resolution because they wanted change. So they wanted human societies to move from violent um, and destructive patterns toward the potential for creative, constructive, and nonviolent capacities to deal with human conflict. So this means replacing patterns of violence and coercion with respect, creative problem solving, increased dialogue, and nonviolent mechanisms of social change. So to accomplish this, a complex web of change processes by a transformational understanding of life and relationship is needed. So here are my references. Thank you for listening.
Thank,
So that's all, sir.
thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful and marvelous presentation you shared with our participants. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir, after our one speaker later, we will come back with our Q&A session. Okay, sir?
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
sir.
Dear participants, let's we welcome our last speaker. Today, our speaker name is Ma'am Ilan Jain, and her topic is conflict transformation. Let's we welcome our another speaker to the screen. Hello, ma'am.
Hello, sir. Thank you for the introduction. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Ellen Jane Tadena from Pamigan Integrated School, SDO Zambales, Philippines. And my topic is about conflict transformation.
Share your screen, please, ma'am. Make it full
Okay.
screen, ma'am.
Okay, so to start, let's define what is conflict transformation. So this is the simple and short definition or meaning of conflict transformation is the art of turning animosity, domination, and hatred into a spirit of collaboration. And the central goal of conflict transformation is to build a constructive change out of the energy created by conflict. Lenses of Conflict Transformation by John Paul Lederach. So as you can see, there is three lenses. The first one is the distance, intermediate, and near. So one lens helps bring into focus things a great distance that would otherwise be a blur. Second lens brings into clarity things that are mid-range, like computer screen. The final one, the reading or magnifying lens that helps to read a book. Conflict transformation is more than a set of techniques, specific techniques. It is a it is a way of looking and seeing, and it provides a set of lenses through which we make sense of social conflict. These lenses draw our attention to certain aspects of conflict and helps us to bring the overall meaning of the conflict into sharper focus. So first, we need to we need a lens to see the immediate situation. Second, we need a lens to see past immediate problems and view the deeper relationship patterns that form the context of the conflict. So this goes beyond finding a quick solution to the problem at hand and seeks to address what is happening in human relationships at a deeper level. And the third one is we need a lens that helps us envision a framework that holds this together and creates a platform to address the content, the context, and the structure of the relationships. From this platform, parties can begin to find creative response and solutions. So, in order to understand better what is a conflict transformation, let us discuss the various components of conflict transformation. So the first one is envision and respond. So envision and respond, a transformational approach begins with two proactive foundations. Number one is a positive orientation toward conflict, and the second one is a willingness to engage in the conflict in an effort to produce constructive change or growth. While conflict often produces long standing cycles of hurt and destruction, the key to transformation is the capacity to envision conflict as having the potential for constructive change. Response, on the other hand, suggests a bias toward direct involvement and an increased understanding that comes from real life experiences. So both envision and respond represent the ways we orient ourselves toward the presence of conflict in our lives, relationships, and communities. So, the second component of conflict transformation is the EBB and flow. Conflict is a natural part of relationship. While relationships are sometimes calm and predictable, at other times events and circumstances generate tensions and instability. A transformational view, rather than looking at isolated conflict episodes, seeks to understand how these particular episodes are embedded in the greater pattern of human relationships. So EBBN flow change is understood both at the level of immediate issues and the broader patterns of interaction. Change is broader. So rather than viewing conflict as a threat, the transformation views this conflict as a valuable opportunity to grow and increase our understanding of ourselves and others. So the next component is a life-giving opportunities. So on the one hand, this phrase suggests that life gives us conflict. Yes, life gives us conflict. And that conflict is a natural part of human experience and relationships. So rather than viewing conflict as a threat, so let's view it as a opportunity to grow and increase understanding of ourselves and others. So conflict helps us stop, assess, and take notice. Without it, life would be a monotonous flat topography of sameness, and our relationships would be woefully superficial. So, life giving opportunities. And the next component is the constructive change processes. So, this notion emphasizes the capacity of the transformational approach to build new things. Conflict transformation begins with a central goal. So, the central goal of the conflict transformation is to build a constructive change out of the energy created by conflict. So, by focusing this energy on the underlying relationships and social structures, constructive changes can be brought about. So the key here is to move conflict away from
Hello, ma'am.
destructive processes and toward constructive ones.
Hello,
Yes, sir.
ma'am. Sorry to say that your slide is not moving, ma'am.
Okay. So I'll fix it. I try to fix it, sir.
It's now moving, ma'am. Okay.
Okay. Okay. I'll just try to present it to share screen again, sir. So window. Can you see my share screen now, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It's now okay.
Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. You can carry on.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So we did. Okay. So one of the components of conflict transformation is the constructive change processes. So this this notion emphasizes the capacity of the transformational approach to build new things. Conflict transformation begins with a central goal to build constructive change out of the energy created by conflict. So, by focusing this energy on the underlying relationships and social structures, constructive changes can be brought about. The key here is to move conflict away from destructive processes and toward constructive ones. So, that is the constructive change and processes. So, in this component, the primary task of conflict transformation is not to find quick solutions to immediate problems, but rather to generate creative platforms that can simultaneously address surface issues and change underlying social structures and relationship patterns. So the next component of conflict transformation is what we call the reduce violence and increase justice. So transformation must be able to respond to lives on the ground challenges, needs, and realities. So to reduce violence, we must address both the obvious issues and content of any given dispute, and also their underlying patterns and causes. To increase justice, we must ensure that people have access to political procedures and voice in the decisions that affect their lives. So reduce violence and increase justice. It suggests that conflict. So the next component is the direct interaction and social structure. So in this component, the concerns about violence and justice suggest that we need to develop capacities to engage in change processes at the interpersonal, intergroup, and social structural levels. So one set of capacities points toward direct face-to-face interaction between people or groups. So the other set underscores the need to see, pursue, and create change in our ways of organizing social structures, from families to complex bureaucracies to structures at the global level. So this requires a capacity to understand and sustain dialogue as a fundamental means of constructive change. The next component is a human relationship. So relationships are the heart of conflict transformation. So rather than concentrating exclusively on the content and substance of the dispute, the transformational approach suggests that the key to understanding conflict and developing creating creative change processes lies in seeing the less visible aspects of relationships. So while the issues over which people fight are important and require creative response, relationships represent a web of connections that form the broader context of the conflict. So it is out of this relationship context that particular issue arise and either become volatile or get quickly resolved. So conflict and change. So both conflict and change are a normal part of human life. So conflict is is part of human life and it's normal. So conflict is continuously present in human relationships. And the fabric of these relationships is constantly adapting and changing. So there are four central modes in which conflict impacts situations and changes things. The first one is personal. So it is fully develop individuals' potentials and well-being. Number two is relational. So when we say relational, as we can transform conflict on our own. Relations to our and others' emotions are also important and need to be foregrounded. The third one is structural. So structural is to understand root causes of the problem, root causes of the conflict. And the last one is cultural. When we say cultural, it is identifying cultural patterns and build upon therein within contextual and cultural settings. Conflict change. So the personal dimension refers to changes effected in and desired for the individual. So this includes the cognitive, emotional, perceptual, and spiritual aspects of human experience over the course of conflict. So from a descriptive perspective, transformation suggests that individuals are affected by conflict in both negative and positive ways. So for example, conflict affects our physical well being, self esteem, emotional stability, capacity to perceive accurately, and spiritual integrity. So, prescriptively, transformation represents deliberate intervention to minimize the destructive effects of social conflict and maximize its potential for individual growth and at physical, emotional, and spiritual levels. Next is the relational dimension. So the relational dimension depicts the changes affected in and desired for the face-to-face relationships. Here, issues of emotions, power, and interdependence, and the communicative and interactive aspects of conflict are essential. Descriptively, transformation refers to how the patterns of communication and interaction in relationships are affected by conflict. It looks beyond visible issues to underlying changes produced by conflict and how people perceive what they pursue and how they structure the relationship. So, relational dimension. So, when we say the relational dimension, most significantly, social conflict makes explicit how close or distant people wish to be, how they will use and share power, what they perceive of themselves and each other, and what patterns of interaction they wish to have. Next is the structural dimension. So, structural dimension highlights the underlying causes of conflict and stresses the ways in which social structures, organizations, and institutions are built, sustained, and changed by conflict. It is about the ways people build and organize social, economic, and institutional relationships to meet basic human needs and provide access to resources and decision making. At the descriptive level, transformation refers to the analysis of social conditions that give rise to conflict and the way that conflict affects social structural change and existing social, political, and economic situations. So, structural dimension. So, in a prescriptive at the prescriptive level, transformation represents efforts to provide insight into underlying causes and social conditions that create and foster violent expressions of conflict. So, and promote nonviolent mechanisms that reduce adversarial interaction and minimize violence. Next is the cultural dimension. So, cultural dimension refers to the ways that conflict changes the patterns of group life, as well as the ways that culture affects the development of processes to handle and respond to conflict. At the descriptive level, transformation seeks to understand how conflict affects and changes cultural patterns of a group and how those accumulated and shared patterns affect the way people in a given context understand and respond to conflict. So, at a descriptive level, transformation seeks to understand how conflict affect and change cultural patterns of a group and how those accumulated patterns affect the way people in a given context understand and response to conflict. So, prescriptively, transformation seeks to uncover the cultural patterns that contribute to violence in a given context and to identify and build on existing cultural resources and mechanisms for handling conflict. So, the resolution and transformation, a brief comparison of perspectives. So, what is the difference between conflict resolution perspective and the conflict transformation perspective? When it comes to the key question, so conflict resolution, the key question for the conflict resolution is how do we end something not desired? When it comes to conflict transformation, so the key question is how to end something destructive and build something desired. The focus of conflict resolution is a content centered, while the conflict transformation is a relationship centered. The purpose of conflict resolution is to achieve an agreement and solution to the presenting problem creating the crisis, while the purpose of the conflict transformation is to promote constructive change processes, inclusive of but not limited to immediate solutions. When it comes to the development of the process, conflict resolution embedded and built around the immediacy of the relationship where the presenting problems appear. So while conflict transformation is concerned with responding to symptoms and engaging the systems within which relationships are embedded. So, time frame, the horizon is short term for conflict resolution, and for conflict transformation, the horizon is mid to long range. When it comes to view of conflict, it envisions the need to de-escalate conflict processes in conflict resolution. So while in conflict transformation, the view con the view of conflict is to envision conflict as a dynamic of EBB or conflict escalation to pursue constructive change and flow or conflict escalation to pursue constructive change. So before I end my presentation, let me leave a quote to you. So peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to cope with it. So by Dorothy Thomas. So that ends my presentation. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful presentation. I hope our participants learn something new from you. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay, ma'am. After a short video clips, we come back again with our Q&A session. Okay, ma'am. Dear participants, today we have no quiz competition, so now we are going to our Q&A session. After a short video clips, we come back again with our speakers. Hello, sir. Arnold, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Dear participants, you can also ask the question to our Dr. Arnold. He is our today's guest speaker. Dear participants, this is our question and answer session. You can send your question in our comment box. And I request everyone to adjust the speaker name. Then you ask the question in the comment box. Hello, ma'am. May, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, ma'am. The question is for you. And the question is, what is the importance of conflict in our life since it is already a part of our daily life?
Okay. Conflict can be very healthy. It increases awareness of problems that exists and provides a reason for finding a better way forward. When conflict is valued, it encourages an environment where change is seen as positive, a way of making things better. And it depends on how you handle the struggle or the conflict itself. And of course, as a common saying, always trust the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir Anil, can you add more?
Okay, so as I have experience, so the best thing or the importance of conflict is to we have to open to the new ideas. Since there is a conflict, there is a new idea for that, and we should also we have to express ourselves when it comes to conflict. We have to stand on our own and to share our ideas so that other person can understand us. Another thing is we should be flexible. If our ideas is not good or it's not acceptable to anybody, so therefore we should be flexible to change our ideas so that the conflict would be okay or the problem should be solved.
Thank you, sir. Our next question to Ma'am May. And the question is, how do you manage to work with people whom you are not comfortable with? Hello, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, sir. As Ma'am Jessamy said a while ago from the tips she had given, um, even though you are not comfortable with other people, you should not you should try to get deal with them in a civil way that they can't hurt them, or they can even feel that you're uncomfortable with them. And from that, you can be able to mingle with them even if you are not comfortable. But since you are in a same workplace, to be able to have a healthy environment, just go on with the flow and try not to hurt them. Be positive always. That's it.
Thank you. Sir Anmol?
Okay, so as I have experienced this year, so even if I have conflict with other person, I must look of my myself first. What are the things that I need to change? What are my differences in the ideas of that person? And most especially, even if we are working in the same workplace, we have to stand on our own. We have to stand on our beliefs. As long as we are not creating another conflict, we have to um, we have to give our very best to our workplace. We have to be a model to other persons so that even if you have conflict with others, they can see you as a model person. And most especially, we should be work professionally. We will do our job even if with those conflicts, and those conflicts will follow, or will, because will be erased or will be disappear later on.
Thank you, sir. Our next question to Ma'am Jessamy, and the question is on what tips that you discuss is the most effective when it comes to having conflict with colleagues.
Okay, so thank you, Sir Rolando Dagun, for that question. Okay, so given that all the tips I've shared with you a while ago, those are all essential and important. But I think the best way is to use neutral language so that we can make the situation easier, which will prevent the conflict from escalating. Now, it also shows respect and calmness despite the situation. So, with this, we can make good decisions and therefore solve the conflict in a better way. That's it. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, ma'am. Sir Arnold, you can add more.
Another thing is my colleagues and the all teachers here and my friends, they are giving advices to us, those who encountered conflicts with the work in the workplace. Especially one of their advice is to have a silent war. Silent war meaning you have to work on your own, um, do your best, and tell that person in silent, without words, that you as a person, you are a good person. Even if you have a conflict with that person will soon believe that your beliefs and opinions is true. Meaning, um, if you stand in your beliefs, you have to do something for it, and you have to prove to that person that you are the right person. You have the good opinions and good uh, thing in mind.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is for Ma'am Jessamy, and the question is most probably what is the best technique to use when dealing and solving family-related conflict that arise continually every now and then, regardless of how small the stimuli that triggers problem to arise.
Yes, sir. So thank you, Ma'am Mary Joyce Calante Mondida, for that question. So I think the best way to deal with family-related conflicts, ma'am, is to analyze the conflict, where the conflict came from or what causes that certain conflict. Because sometimes there are things that a family member wants to share or has something to or that causes a certain problem, so that it causes or it became the reason for that conflict. And also, we should reflect on the situation. Let's understand their concerns, let's hear their voices, because sometimes they are misunderstood. Okay? Sometimes they want to be heard. Okay, so I think the best way here is to reflect on the situation and analyze the conflict, or where the conflict came from, or what event triggered the conflict and why. So from that, we could arrive with the best way on how to solve the problem, also by working together, by collaboration, by brainstorming. So that's it, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir Anmol.
Another one is like Jasame told earlier that when there is a conflict, we have to the best thing to do is to talk to the person. We have to stay calm. We have to set aside our emotions, and we have to ask that person what are the things that um the things that made us a conflict. We have to listen to them carefully. We have to understand what are they talking about, and to check or to reflect again what is wrong with us. And when person is interrupting, when that person is saying something, do not interrupt, or do not interrupt. And another thing is just listen first before your turn. So you have to the best thing is you have the communication, you have the clear understanding on such matter, and then later on you could have the best solution to the problem. And if that solution is not um, solved for that specific plan, therefore talk again, so that maybe those solution is not that would not guarantee that the conflict will end.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for sharing your valuable knowledge with our participants and also giving us your valuable time. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, sir, Dr. Anwar. Okay, dear participants, thank you everyone for attending this session and make this webinar successful. But we are sorry to say that some of our technical problem in our website, we can share our today's certification code. We will share this tomorrow morning session or afternoon session. Thank you everyone for your active participation in this session. We are sorry to say that some of our technical problem in our website, we can share our today's certification code. We hope we'll share this in a short time in our Facebook page. Thank you everyone. Stay happy and stay safe.